We represent people who have been denied private disability benefits under an ERISA-based disability policy. Either their employer provides it, or sometimes they have purchased their own. And if they're denied, we handle the appeal and the litigation and what have you after that. That's really rewarding because that's a system where it's really difficult to succeed without a lawyer.
Hey everyone, Bo Royal here, co-founder and CEO of Pareto Legal, marketing agency that helps injury lawyers increase their profits with digital strategy, online advertising, and analytics. You're listening to the Pareto Legal Podcast, where we feature world-class attorneys, entrepreneurs, and legal experts. And today I am joined by Frank Kearney, founding partner at Donahoe Kearney, a Washington, D.C. based law firm that focuses on personal injury, workers' compensation, and disability cases. In this episode, we'll learn more about Frank's background and how he's been able to scale and optimize his firm. Frank, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Bill. Really appreciate it. Love to be on, and thanks for hosting me. Like I said, I'm a big fan of the Pareto principle. I love the name of your company. So really looking forward to speaking with you.
Thank you. So I want to start, Frank, with your kind of journey and what led you to specialize in injury and disability law. So can you share a bit about that journey and what motivated you to ultimately specialize in injury and disability law?
Absolutely. And in fact, I've been practicing over 3 decades now. And the way I got started is, like most people who went to law school, I wanted to help other people. And I always wanted to be a trial lawyer in court in some form or fashion, either as a prosecutor, criminal defense. I didn't really know much about civil litigation or personal injury cases or trials for that matter. In fact, the first full trial I saw, I was the lawyer in it. So right when I got out of law school. But I had an Army ROTC scholarship to college. So I thought I was going to go into the Army. I was commissioned as an infantry lieutenant back in 1990, and I deferred that to go to law school because I'd gotten into law school. Make kind of a long story short, there was a drawdown troop-wise in those years, very peaceful time, thankfully in our country, and I ended up transferring to the JAG Corps, the Army lawyers, but into the reserves instead of active duty. So I really had to scramble to, kind of find a job and get myself going because I really hadn't planned for that. Thankfully, the best thing that came out of law school was I met my wife, Kathy, and that was awesome. We just celebrated 31 years of marriage the other day, as a matter of fact. But that first year was rough because, I really didn't have a job. I was working for a firm that I had clerked for in law school and worked for part-time. They were nice enough to kind of keep me on for 6 or 8 months or so until I could find a quote unquote real job. And they did all kinds of different things. They're very much general practice, kind of meat and potatoes law firm, I would say. And I knew even then that you really had to specialize to, 1, get good at something, and 2, to, earn money and earn a nice living. And so I started off really then working for an insurance defense law firm. So I was actually on the other side. I was on the dark side, as we called it, representing insurance companies and large employers and large corporations against people who had gotten hurt, either, at work or in car accidents, or they would slip and fall on the property or what have you. That was great experience. I did that for about 2 years because I was in court all the time. And, in those cases, a lot of times the young lawyers, young associates are given cases where there's not a whole lot of exposure, but they need someone to defend them anyway. So in court, a lot of great experience. And I ended up having a couple of cases against a prominent law firm that represented plaintiffs, individuals. Their main partner called me one day after a case and said, "Hey, would you, consider coming over to this side?" So I did. So I started then representing individuals, another really good experience, large law firm. And I met my partner, Keith Donahoe there. He and I broke off actually 20 years ago and started Donahoe Kearney. And so our main goal, our main focus, of course, was just representing people who'd been seriously injured. And in those days, we did a lot of medical malpractice, car injuries, construction site accidents, work injuries mostly in DC, a little bit in Virginia and Maryland, but primarily, primarily in Washington, DC. And that's been awesome. We've had the firm ever since. Keith actually retired about 1.5 or 2 years ago. But I just had lunch with him the other day. We're still, very good friends, and he did a great job. So I've now, transitioned the firm a little bit away from more of those medical malpractice cases where we really needed 2 people or more working on them, to now I really focus on helping working class people when they get hurt on the job. So we represent a lot of steam fitters and plumbers and electricians and maids and mechanics and bus drivers and security guards, folks like that with, pretty heavy physical jobs, and a lot of construction workers, of course.
What percentage of your firm's business would you say comes from injury versus workers' comp versus disability?
The disability portion we've only gotten into recently within the last few years. That's a great mix for someone like me who has a lot of experience working with experts from the medical malpractice side and a lot of experience working against insurance companies from the workers' comp and the personal injury side. So we represent people who have been denied private disability benefits under an ERISA-based disability policy. Either their employer provides it, or sometimes they have purchased their own. And if they're denied, we handle the appeal and the litigation and what have you after that. That's really rewarding because that is helping people that's a system where it's really difficult to succeed without a lawyer. It's just it's all federal law, and just very hard without it. Really favors the discretion of these insurance companies. The law does. So, and these folks usually have a really significant medical condition or injury, primarily professional folks, lawyers, pharmacists, architects, editors, those kinds of jobs. So that's a nice juxtaposition with, a lot of our construction worker clients we have. Some of them have a second grade education from El Salvador. They left school 50 years ago or something. So I love being able and having my team be able to relate to all kinds of people. And that's really what makes it, I think so worthwhile, that everyone has that dignity, everyone has that worth, everyone has some type of, help that they need that we can give them. And so, so I would say business wise, just because of the numbers, there are more people hurt at work. So that's a larger percentage, I would say, probably, 70% or so, and then another 20% of serious car accidents. And we only take pretty serious injuries in that realm. And then another 10% or so of the long-term disability denials that we handle.
So it's almost like these 3 practice areas in some sense are kind of adjacent to one another. You could have a personal injury client that eventually becomes a disability client, or you could have a workers' compensation client that eventually becomes a disability client. So there's kind of like a web almost between some of these practice areas. I'd actually like to ask, you alluded to this earlier, when you were starting out with your partner, were you more inclined to accept a broader array of case types? And then as time passed, you kind of refined the criteria down to only specific types of cases?
No, I think we did a pretty smart thing. Something I would encourage people to do from the beginning is we really focused on just a couple of kind of cases. And like you said, they're very complementary. It's not like trying to handle, personal injury cases and bankruptcy and write wills and defend DUIs. Those are all four completely different things. But with the medical malpractice, with the serious work injuries, with the car accidents, it was a lot involving the medicine. And the law is pretty similar in those areas, and the trial skills are very similar. So yeah, we really tried to focus and niche down pretty hard from the beginning.
Smart. Yeah. I think, operationally, that probably saved you a lot of headache, in that you were, much more selective up front with what you were accepting. I also agree with you, personal injury and workers' compensation, there's almost kind of like a Venn diagram between the two, where some people don't even realize that they need a workers' compensation attorney, and they might, in their searching and their research, they might be initially looking for a personal injury attorney. And then they actually realize, oh, wait a minute, I was hurt on the job. I need to work with a completely different type of specialist on this matter. So that makes a lot of sense. I wanted to talk about marketing strategy for the firm. Obviously you've been, the firm's been around for 20 years now, and that's a huge feat. There's a lot of statistics about small businesses only lasting a certain amount of time, and you've been at it now for 2 decades. What marketing strategies over the years have you found to be most effective in building a trusted brand like Donahoe Kearney?
Well, I think a couple things, Bo. The first is to really understand who your avatar client is, or your avatar clients, because they may be different. They are different for each, niche group that you have, even though those practice areas may really overlap and really be complementary. The avatar client in each is probably a little bit different. So I think that's the very first thing. And then speaking to that, to that person, I come from a working class background, so I'm very comfortable speaking with a, 40, 50-year-old steam fitter who's, got out of high school and went into the union apprenticeship program and now has been working and has reached a, really high level in his trade because he's working so much overtime and getting differentials and what have you. But I feel like I really understand that person and can, communicate with them well. And I always try to, for our team, kind of hire people who have a similar background to that can really relate to, working people and people who live, paycheck to paycheck. And I mean, look, many of us have been there. I certainly have, in my early years. And I think that's critical. So the number one thing I think is being able to relate. And then, marketing principles don't really change. The technology changes, the mediums change. But the actual principles, not so much. I mean, people in our business, have a problem, right? They didn't wake up yesterday saying, gee, I'm going to get hit by a truck today, and so I better, have a lawyer kind of that I have a relationship with. Many of these things are just foisted upon them very suddenly. It's very disruptive. They have to worry about, medical treatment and dealing with doctors and hospitals and not being able to pay their bills and not understanding, the language of the doctor and being in that whole system. I mean, I thankfully I have never had to, go to a doctor consistently, but I can't imagine going to, 3 or 4 appointments a week, and dealing with, just dealing with that and the stress of rehab. So we really try to take away all the stress, uncertainty, anxiety, so people can focus on getting better, focus on their rehab, their recovery. I think those are the main things, Bo, really knowing your avatar client, being able to speak to him or her, and then just good marketing principles of how we're going to solve your problem, how we're going to help you. It's not about us. It's about, our people, our avatar clients who have these problems and need them solved in a, in a way that's both, legally sound and the correct way, but also, compassionate and friendly and not being talked down to. I don't know about you, but I've certainly had the experience with physicians and other professionals, accountants, of them, sort of talking down to me a little bit. And I don't think there's anything worse.
I agree. I want to ask about, you mentioned your avatar being, construction workers or steam fitters. How much of your marketing effort is built around networking and developing relationships with unions and things of that nature? And is that something that you kind of spearhead on your own, or do you have someone on your team that is kind of facilitating that effort?
A little bit of both. We do a lot of community outreach, and yes, we visit, unions, and we, try to give them the resources. So if they get a call from one of their members who gets hurt, they at least can maybe answer the quick question or get them to us to answer, more detailed information or kind of help them analyze it. And we do all that for free. But yes, I have Grace on my team, and usually we'll have one or two other people, maybe Acela or Paul, who work with us in kind of our operations work, on the cases. So really communicate with clients quite a bit. They will go visit different unions here in the DC area. We do a lot of community outreach as well, primarily with groups that we're interested in, that we think are important and make an impact. One is a local group called Perfectly Delicious, which is a local person, actually lives relatively close to me and happens to be friends with my wife, but she started this well before that. Has a disabled son who's probably 30 or so. And in that world, there are a lot of great services for people who are disabled until about they graduate from high school or their early 20s, because they can kind of extend that. And after that, there just isn't much. So Perfectly Delicious was formed to bake dog treats, right? Because so many people, are crazy for their dogs, my family included. But all of the workers there, have some type of challenge or disability. And it's just a great thing to kind of start a business that's geared toward helping, probably 10 or 12 or 15 people with these kind of limited abilities, to give them a job, to pay them. They get the responsibility, and they're, on some level working with dogs. They have events and stuff, and the dogs come in. So things like that, we'll support that, go to their events and kind of try to network with them. We recently did, a couple of my employees, Paul and Acela, just did worked with a group called Build a Bed here in DC. It's probably nationwide, but, helps build bunk beds for kids who don't have a bed. Maybe they're in foster care. Maybe they're in and out of, moving from a shelter to this place or that place. And, there's all this research that's done on things like that being so important to a child. I heard one time, having a suitcase if you're in foster care is really important, because you're moving a lot and you don't want to carry your clothes in Safeway bags or plastic bags or grocery bags or whatever. So trying to find little things like that we can kind of, as a team that we relate to, we're like, oh, that's really cool. Let's do that. And I don't know that that's really marketing per se. It probably isn't. I mean, we do it because we like the groups and we think they're, a good thing to do. But certainly the unions helping out union workers. I wrote a guide for union workers. If they get hurt, we give them our book. I wrote the book on the DC workers' compensation system, because you're right, kind of to one of your earlier questions, Bo, is that people don't necessarily know when they need a lawyer. And workers' comp, especially, it's not intuitive. It's very much based on regulations and, the statutes and the case law. And unless you've been through it before, there's just no way to understand all of that, all those nuances. And that's a little different. Some, personal injury cases, if it's a small injury and, pretty clear liability, someone, hits you and you go to the doctor a few times, sure, you could probably handle that on your own. That's a much more intuitive process.
I'm glad you brought up the book that you wrote. If memory serves me correctly, you've written a couple of books. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to ask, it might be hard to quantify this, but like, do you have a sense of how much work that you've gotten from writing these books? And I guess another way, that's kind of one part of the question, and you probably don't have an answer, and that's fine, because attributing leads and cases to something like that's probably a little challenging. But I guess to simplify the question, do you think because you have devoted time to building content like that and becoming a thought leader on these topics, do you think there's been residual benefit to your marketing as a whole because you did that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, 100%. Especially, I first wrote our workers' comp book, Protect Your Rights, the ultimate guide to DC workers' compensation, back in, I think, 2009. So we're in our third edition now. It has to be updated periodically when the law changes, what have you. But yeah, absolutely. I think that is critical to marketing, having, something like that it's an actual physical book we have to mail to people. It's probably 125 pages or something, but it really, it tells someone who's hard at work, what to do and what not to do and kind of what the law is. It's not just hire us kind of a book, right? Or 2-page little report that you get. So I think, yes, that's been really important, for years and years. And I mean, honestly, a little marketing secret is, I have a lot of guys who especially, before COVID, when we did everything in person, who would come in to sign up and, they will never read the book. Okay. They're just not, readers. They don't read very much. And, but their wife will read the book and she'll say, I see where you said in chapter 17, this, and should Joe do this or that? And so you get a lot of that kind of, interesting dynamic there, I would say. Yeah.
So it's almost been a way to nurture the client relationship. Is that something that you, for every client that signs up with your firm, do they receive a copy of the book, or is that something that you're kind of giving out, piecemeal based on, the clients asking a lot of questions? You're like, you know what? I wrote a book on this. Here, reference chapter 3 or something like that. How do you distribute that book?
We do give it to our clients. But yes, we still answer kind of the specific questions. I know I've often thought it would be nice if I just said, well, page 62 or chapter 7 or something, but we don't do it that way. So yes, they get a copy of the book. I think that's great. Also, that's people really don't throw away books. Even in our very digital and video type, society that we're in now, the last 4 or 5 years, I would say, books are a little old fashioned, have a little bit of that staying power. We do a mailed monthly newsletter, as well, to our clients and to people, anyone who contacts us really, goes on our mailing list. And that, it's not about the law. It's 90% of it is, things like, going out, and to the Build-A-Bed event, or, visiting a church group for something, or a union on, we'll speak to them sometimes, especially their apprenticeship meetings, their younger members, about just, look, here's what to look out for. Hope this doesn't happen to you, but if you or someone gets hurt, do these 3 things. They're pretty easy. Do these 3 things. And then, for the first week, you should be okay. Right. That kind of stuff. So
do you find that because you've taken the time to really write out, you said 150 pages of content, that, you are repurposing that content for more shorter form mediums? Like, I mean, I would think if probably took you 100 hours or hundreds of hours to kind of organize all of those thoughts. Has that been kind of a, primary source for your marketing effort, where it's like, look, I've already written 20 pages on this topic. Let's repurpose this for a video, or let's repurpose this for a blog on the website?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I think anytime that's a great marketing principle, Bose. Anytime you have good content, repurpose it. How many times can you chop it up? Maybe can you change it a little bit for whatever, segmented audience you're after, or what have you. We have a pretty robust follow-up campaign, for example, for people who contact us, but for whatever reason we can't get a hold of them. Maybe they leave us a message in the middle of the night, or fill out a web form or something on our website. But yes, a lot of that is sort of education, based, but really letting people know, hey, the best thing you can honestly do, and we offer the service, is get on the phone with us for, even 15, 20 minutes. I mean, there are literally, but when you've been doing this for 30 years, I mean, there are some questions, you can answer in 30 seconds. I mean, I can just say the answer is no, or the answer is 17, or whatever it is. And then they sleep better at night. They're not worried about it, over the weekend. And we encourage our clients to do that too, to say, hey, if you're not sure about something, if you're really worried, anxious about something, shoot us an email, give us a call, something, give us a chance to just put your mind at ease, right?
So it's a perfect segue to my next question, because I want to talk about client engagement. How does your firm approach client engagement in a way that, ensures that you're consistently meeting their needs and expectations?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's all about communication. I mean, and that's the key. If you are a lawyer, or really any small business, I think that where your customers or clients are individuals, you have to be a great communicator. You have to get really comfortable with consistent and professional communication. We try to get ahead of that by giving updates, for example, on cases and things that are happening before someone even calls. But, you're never going to anticipate everything. So we really think of it as a kind of a two-way street. And honestly, I mean, now I think like a lot of businesses, we, can text our clients, email, video chat, phone calls, and wherever they're sort of comfortable. Okay. I mean, a lot of people, don't answer their cell phone, or don't have their voicemail set up. So things like that, we're just like, okay, well, we're gonna find out where you're comfortable kind of communication wise, and then try to gauge. And some people really would just like their issue solved, and they don't need to hear or want to hear from us. And, and some people are, and look, in some cases, we're just a reminder of a bad thing that happened to them, right? This terrible accident that they went through, what have you. So we've got to be, a little bit sensitive to that, I think. But yeah, communication's the key. And, technology helps a lot with that. We have client portals, and, like I said, we can text, we can email, we can call, we try to kind of compress things so that we can really get them, the answer without overwhelming people. So,
do you have an overarching framework that you use to ensure that communication is happening, consistently at an acceptable level? Because, I know, like, for example, workers' compensation cases, there can be a long stretch of time where they're in monitor status, where you don't really have much to be doing on the case, but maybe a client hasn't heard from you in 3, 6, 12 months. Do you have some type of protocol or workflow where, you're at least having some recurring touch points, some update for your clients, so that they're not sitting there and wondering, why do I have an attorney again? What is this guy doing for me?
Right. No, that's a great question, Bo, because you're right. Especially in a work injury case, there's a lot of activity in the beginning, usually a lot to do. And so they may be hearing from us, 3 or 4 or 5 times a week, or sometimes several times a day even. And then once everything gets going, say they've had a surgery, they're recovering, what have you, then there isn't a real need. There can be months without, too much that really needs to be addressed or go on. But yes, our goal and our protocol is to contact people at least once every 30 days. And sometimes that's me, sometimes that's someone else. If we haven't talked to someone in a long time, maybe we've tried them a couple of times and they haven't gotten back to us, then we do try. We want to make sure, hey, is everything okay? Sometimes just kind of a check-in call, really. Look, there's no updates on your case. Everything's fine, but just want to see how you're doing. How you feeling? What's happening? And then you'll learn things like, maybe something in their personal life it requires a lot of attention. One of their kids, an elderly parent, what have you. And I think things like that just help in the whole relationship. Because for us, it's really about a relationship. This is not like a transactional thing. We're not just selling something and getting money for it. Handing someone a document or getting their, court case dismissed or their DUI or what have you. It's much more of a relationship. So we do try to kind of get to know people in that way. And communication is key. We also, I think, do a pretty good job of letting them know what to expect. I mean, based on our experience, we have a pretty good track record, pretty good understanding of what's going to occur. So we'll tell them, hey, there's going to be an awful lot of activity right, now in the next 2-3 weeks. Then, there's going to be a lull for a bit. And then we're going to be trying to settle your case, maybe, what have you, a year from now, let's say. There's going to be a lot of activity then. So they can kind of, plan that rhythm type of, or understand at least sort of the rhythm of sometimes how cases go.
I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about digital. So obviously, for any law firm, some online presence is critical. How has your firm leveraged digital marketing, SEO or social media or pay-per-click, any of the above, right? Content marketing. How have you leveraged different digital tactics to attract clients over the years?
We have a pretty robust website where we've written almost all of the content, really. And we do optimize that obviously for SEO, so people can find us. That's a very competitive and saturated area. I mean, you may be competing against a law firm in California that is just trying to attract these cases to, farm them out to somewhere else, right? So it is difficult, I would say, to compete in that space. Again, what we try to do, Bo, is write for our avatar client and focus on sort of long tail, searches, long tail keywords. Someone who is searching for how do I, handle my work injury case since I have a rotator cuff tear and may not be able to, lift my arm over my head, something like that, versus just like DC workers' compensation lawyer or something. So that's one of the things we do. We have a lot of great online reviews, Google reviews, and so we ask for those, pretty routinely. That's part of our process, and we've been fortunate. We have a lot of great clients, and even people who we can't take their case, because if we can't help someone, we're going to try to do something for them. Refer them to someone who can. Send them a book. Maybe it's small enough they can handle it on their own. Give them like a guide. We have some shorter guides that can, that can kind of walk them through the basic steps, things like that. So I think that's a big thing is, getting those good and legitimate, honest Google reviews. We don't use a service or anything like that for that. We just, our team asks for them, and trying to make it easy on clients. But you're right. The digital space is really, it can be daunting, I think, for small businesses because of that competition, because, it's hard to know what's working and not working. So
you mentioned, obviously robust website. You have done SEO work to make sure that content is indexable and people can find it on search engines. You mentioned content marketing. What about are you doing anything from a social media perspective, a paid perspective online, or is really SEO and content your bread and butter for lead generation?
I would say that that's our bread and butter. Updating our Google business profiles, because we have 2 offices, so that complicates things. We have one in Washington, D.C., one in Alexandria, Virginia, right, just a few miles away. That's a, so that's a key. I would say, yes, that's pretty much our bread and butter. We don't do any paid advertising or digital, like LSAs or PPC or what have you. Again, that's I think a really hard space to compete in. Is one of the major reasons for that, I would say. So we tried to, kind of really drill down on what we're good at, and we do certainly social media. Yes, we do, post on social media, and again, try to make it interesting and entertaining. I mean, that's a basic, marketing principle as well, right? Don't be boring. I mean, be interesting. And if you do that, you can capture people's attention. Even I, who get, I'm sure I get 100 or more emails a day. A number of them are marketing emails, but if I click on one and it's interesting, I'll go back to it, even if it's something I'm not interested in buying, so to speak, right? But it's just oh, that's kind of cool. That's interesting. That's an interesting take. That's well written. Those types of things. So eventually, I think that does. Part of this is also, of course, playing the long game, and knowing that you're best for our business. Yes, in some circumstances, it's important to get a lawyer right away. In others, especially a very serious injury, you can wait. And, we certainly help people who have been, injured 6, 9, 12 months ago, sometimes, who are just coming to us now. Maybe they've had a problem with the insurance company. Maybe they, it was a bad car accident and they've just finished their recovery, or they're just kind of getting to that point where they can even think about what they want to do with a legal case or what they need to do. So I think that's it too, is like I said, sort of, not being just a, quick hit for someone who's calling 9 law firms, right, one after the other. But kind of having that staying power.
I wanted to stick with the topic of marketing, for the next few questions. So, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges law firms face today in terms of marketing, and how has your firm overcome those challenges? I think you've touched on this answer a little bit, but I guess, again, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing law firms today in terms of marketing, and how do you overcome those obstacles at your firm?
I think a couple of things, Bo, is, and we certainly see this, I think, across the board in our society, and that is everyone has a much shorter attention span. And look, myself included, I would say. And so it's really being able to make things easy for your potential client, to kind of get them to stop the search. Okay. And that's why it's, I think, critical to really have, something that's well written, whether it's a landing page or even an intake form or what have you, that speaks to that person and is easy. Like if I, have something, I don't know, that some professional, my accountant or something wants me to fill out and it's too long or too complicated, I'm like, I'm just not doing this. Why do you just, I'll just call you up and tell you my answers, right? But I can't do all of this. So I think that's critical, and really having content, however it's delivered, that is interesting and is not in any way confusing. In fact, tells the person exactly what to do. Here's what you need to do. Like 1, 2, 3. We make it easy for you. That type of thing. I think that's critical because the lack of attention span, also goes along with a lot of the saturation in the market, and the competition. And there's lots of law firms who will, sign up every case and then just discharge whatever 70% of them or something in 3 or 4 weeks. And we're not like that. That may be a business model that works for some. But there's a lot of kind of hidden issues and costs with that as well. Of course, is having a big intake team, having a team to review everything, sort of what I'd call, kind of the blowback of having so many, so many people contact you that you really can't help them, or, maybe, I don't want to say you lead them on, but, just isn't a right fit for you. I think every business has to have its, like I keep saying, the avatar client, but it's about, a fit. And because I know, personally, like I would be a good client for some businesses, some people, and a bad one for others. And that's just, depending on the situation. So yeah, I think that, like I said, saturation, the attention span, those I think are real challenges. Maybe a little bit of not knowing what's real, what isn't, what's AI, what's, kind of handwritten, what is authentic, what is not. I think it's getting harder to tell that. Used to be, when I started practicing law 30 years ago, none of this existed. It was very easy to tell who was authentic. And I think very easy in a lot of ways to, market your business and to kind of stay ahead of the game. And it's getting, I would say, more and more challenging for a lot of folks.
I think I really like that answer because it kind of comes full circle with what you mentioned earlier in the episode, in that, from the onset, when you and your partner founded the firm, you were very clear and intentional on who you were going to be serving, what, case types you were going to be handling for them. And I think that almost acts as like a filter or a razor for some of those challenges. You don't have to, be competing on all these different types of keywords. You don't need to be competing in all these different types of markets. You don't need to be saying yes to, prospective clients that, there might be something of a red flag in that intake process where you're like, ooh, this might not be something that we want to devote time, energy, resources towards. Right. So, I think to kind of like summarize what you said and go back to what you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, being very, clear and precise on who you're going to serve can address some of those challenges in marketing, especially when you mentioned this before, you have out of state big box firms. We all know who they are, right? And they're going after the same traffic as you, but they might not actually specialize in that practice area, or they're not even physically in, the market that you're serving, right? So being very clear in your marketing that, hey, this is who we serve. we're residents of this area. We've been helping, the injured workers of DC for 3 decades or 2 decades now. That type of messaging and clarity, I think, goes a long way. And that's kind of how you go up against Goliath, is you're being consistently clear on that positioning. To kind of wrap this all up, I wanted to look ahead to the future and ask, in your opinion, what legal marketing trends do you think will be most important for law firms to embrace, and how does your firm plan to stay competitive in the years ahead?
Sure. That's a great question, Bo. And I think what you just said, as far as consistency, is critical. And you can't just throw something out there. You have to be consistent and diligent in your approach, in your marketing, in your processes, running your firm, all of that. So I think that was a great point. And I would say, as far as what the future holds, a couple of things. I mean, I think obviously AI is exploding, not just in the legal world, but everywhere. And there's a lot of really cool stuff and good stuff, I think, for that. I personally think we'll still probably need a human touch. But if that can reduce, the time to write an article from, 3 hours to 10 minutes of just editing it and putting those touches on, I mean, that's great, right? That's amazing. I think one of the challenges is going to be, though, with AI and with just the amount of information that's out there, is sort of a copycat approach, and falling into a trap of not differentiating yourself and not being unique and telling your story, and being an individual or being a small business. I mean, look, small businesses are the art and soul of this country's economy. Right? I mean, that's proven over and over in study. And so I think kind of having an abundance mentality and just a bit of creativity to think, okay, how do I get around the Goliath, right? There's always a way. There's always a right. I mean, David found a way, right? And so it's been that way for whatever, 2,500 years, whatever, 2,000 years. And so I think that's part of it. And then really being, you hear like intentional, but I'd say really focused on your message, like you were saying, the clarity of it, who it's for specifically, and being consistent with it. And because I think I think one of the disadvantages sometimes of big companies of any kind is, it's like a big cruise ship. It's hard. You can't turn it on a dime. It's not a 30-foot cruiser. And they fall into that same trap of just doing more without really thinking about it and what it's going. And we could have a whole other conversation on tracking and ROI and, understanding exactly, your case values and, your estimated cost of acquisition, all of that. And I think, I think in large part, some big companies just sort of throw money at their marketing. Which to me, being in a small company, it's much more fun, much more creative, much more engaging, enjoyable, to kind of think about this stuff and really then put it into play and test it and see what works and doesn't work and modify it and experiment with it. So, I mean, I think, AI is obviously huge and is going to get bigger. That's going to be a part of it. And then we'll see what the next technology is. That's a really hard one to predict. But I think as long as you stick to marketing principles, technology doesn't matter as much. And especially if your avatar client or customer skews a little bit older, because he or she's probably not going to be adopting it until their kids show them what it is. Right. So yeah, I'd say that.
Yeah, it's a great answer. I mean, for our listeners, it's really, the strategy, the fundamentals won't change with time. It's the tactical, it's the how, right? That's the thing that's going to be constantly kind of shifting beneath your feet. And you need to stay on top of these things. You mentioned AI. I read something a few months ago, and basically the author was saying something to the effect of, AI is not going to take all our jobs. It's a person that knows how to use AI is a person that's where you're going to lose your job, right? So you might as well start adopting these technologies, learn how to infuse them into that overarching strategy. That seems to be the winning approach when it comes to emergent, technologies, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. It's all about integrating that into your your core processes, core values, your business, your philosophy, all of that. But you're right. But that's a challenge. I mean, for any new technology is the older you get, or the more kind of set in knowing how to do a certain thing, the harder it is to adapt sometimes.
Right. So on that note, to kind of end that point, stay flexible, keep learning, try new things, but don't budge on your fundamentals. Don't budge on the overarching strategy that's gotten you to where you are. Frank, this was such a great conversation. I really appreciate you being on the podcast today. How can our listeners learn more about Donahoe Kearney?
Sure. So we have our website is just Donahoe Kearney, DonahoeKearney.com. Certainly they can reach out to us by email, for example, info@dkllp.com, or call us at 202-393-3320. We're always happy to talk to people, happy to help any way we can. So
thank you again. Thank you everyone for tuning into this episode of the Pareto Legal Podcast. We'll see you next time for another episode.